What's going on, guys? Dr. Greg here with Movement Driven Performance Physiotherapy. Today we're going to talk about the seated thoracic rotation mobility drill with breathing. Okay, so seated thoracic rotation with breathing. Thoracic spine, it's a stiff part of the spine, and it has reason to be because your rib cage is connected to it. So there's a good amount of stiffness there for a good reason, because it's got to protect all the important stuff in between inside that rib cage, like your lungs and your heart. So it needs to be a strong complex, but sometimes when it gets too stiff, what happens is we can't rotate through that part of our spine well, and then our neck starts to suffer because of that, our low back starts to suffer because of that, because all of the wear and tear is occurring at those parts of the spine. In addition, we usually need a good amount of thoracic mobility to be able to have good shoulder range of motion. Okay, so if my spine doesn't move at all, I'm only going to be able to get a certain degree, and then I'm going to start getting impingement type symptoms where the lack of mobility is starting to irritate my rotator cuff and some other structures. So thoracic mobility tends to be something that a lot of people have deficiencies with, and it leads to a whole slew of problems. And we're talking about rotational mobility specifically today. So when we talk about somebody like a golfer or even a tennis player, baseball player, somebody who's in a rotational type of sport, that we need to get that rotation and have that mobility to get power from that. And that's going to improve our golf swing. The more mobility we have in our thoracic spine, it's going to improve the shoulder mobility and shoulder health and all of those things that I was speaking of before. So this is a really good way to not only get some active mobility of the spine, but to engage the rib cage with the breathing. So if that rib cage is stiff and we're not using that mobility when we're breathing deeply, then that rib cage gets stiff, the thoracic spine gets stiff, it all becomes one unit, and we have to separate that. So what you're going to do for this one is find a sturdy chair, regular chair around the house, and then something to put between your knees to squeeze. So I got a foam roller, you can use a pillow, use a ball, whatever you got, just something that kind of keeps the lower half still while we're rotating the upper half, okay? So in the seated position, with my knees flexed up towards my hip, what I'm doing is kind of locking out the lumbar spine so that when I rotate, I'm not getting too much rotation because it's already kind of taken up slack in another position. And I want to really engage that upper back or that thoracic spine between the shoulder blades and get some mobility and some good breath work there, okay? So put something between the legs. You can even cross them if you want at the ankles to kind of give you that more stability down there. And what we're going to do is we're going to cross hands across the chest, and we're simply going to rotate as far as we can, okay? So we're going to rotate as far as we can. So if I'm rotating to the right, I'm going to get to my kind of end point there, and then I'm going to side bend to the right. So if you see it from this view, I'm rotating to the right, and then I'm side bending in that same direction. And that's really just taking up a lot of what I would call slack in the joint and trying to really get to the end range of the mobility of each specific joint in that thoracic spine, okay? So like I said, cross arms here, I'm rotating, then I'm doing my side bend, and once I get here, I'm gonna do my breath work. So I'm gonna go big inhalation in through my nose, and out through my mouth, okay? And what I want to do when I breathe is try to breathe into my rib cage, so to speak. So you want to try to let those ribs, especially around this area, flare outward, and try to breathe and fill up the lungs and try to get that rib cage to expand. Easier said than done. I know that's a weird cue if you've never been told to do that or tried to do that before. But get to that position, side bend, and when you breathe, really try to expand that rib cage. Okay, so then I'm going to come back up and I'm going to try to rotate a little bit further, because what happened was I kind of mobilized some of those joints with that breath work and with those static holds of my muscles really fighting against the stiffness of my joints. So I get back into neutral, I try to get a little bit further, I do my side bend again, and then another breath. Reposition, try to get a little bit further. Side bend. And you can see each breath I'm getting further and further. As you get better at this, You can start to do longer holds, more breaths. But what we're really challenging is not only the mobility of the joint, but the active mobility or the strength in my end range, which really goes a long way from a functional standpoint. So I'm using so many different muscles here, core stabilization, but the muscles between my rib cage, my intercostal muscles, so much is going on there. And then obviously do both sides, but that's really going to help the rotation you have in those rotational sports. It's going to help increase extension when we add some other things into that program. So it's going to help cervical spine health or neck health, low back health, shoulder health, and then really it's going to help breathing too, which is going to boost athletic performance. So lots of positives here. Let me know what you think. If you have any questions, reach out to us, give us a text, give us a call. I hope this one helps you guys. Until next time, Dr. Greg signing off. Have a great day, guys.